Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to tonight's FDA quarterfinal debate.
You're here.
I am Marlene Verlac, and I will be
You're
At least I get one.
Here.
Before we start, it's my role to remind everyone of the rules of FDA debating. We have 5 speakers from the government, which will be Polytechnique tonight.
Here.
They will confront 5 speakers from the opposition, which is CentraleSupélec.
Here.
And these 10 debaters are under the direct scrutiny of our illustrious timekeeper, Bettina.
Here.
Each speaker will be granted 6 minutes of speaking time. During their speech, a speaker may be interrupted by a member of the opposition team, by a point of information or a point of order. Very often we call the points of information POIs. A point of information must be a question. It is asked by standing up and placing one's hand upon one's head or one's hand outstretched. The speaker may or may not accept the point. However, they have to take at least 1 POI and are encouraged to take 2 or more. If a point is accepted, it is included in the timing of the speech. Points of order, on the other hand, are made directly to me, the chair. They regard the procedures and the running of the debate. The aim of the points of order is to ensure that both the rules and the underlying principles of courtesy and decency are respected.
Here.
If a point of order is asked, time will be stopped while I decide the grievance. The first and last minute of each speech are protected. No points of information are allowed during that time. The beginning and the end of the unprotected time will be signaled by the timekeeper with the sound.
Hit.
At the end of the 6 minutes, you will hear the sound. At this point, the speaker is expected to conclude their speech as fast as possible. If they do not do so within 15 seconds, the timekeeper can be as rude and loud as possible until the speaker finishes. Since you, dear audience, are members of this house, you are invited to interact with the speakers throughout the debate. Indeed, if you agree with what the speaker is saying, show your support with a loud "Here!" However, if you disagree with a statement, show your disapproval with a bellowing "Shame!" Good audience tonight.
Here.
In order to start the debate, let's now welcome our teams. Polytechnique will be our government. They are proposing the motion tonight, and their coach is Declan McCavanagh. He's not here yet. Their prime minister is Béatrice Mott. Second speaker, Alexandre. Third speaker is Ahmed Ansari. Fourth speaker will be Thomas de Carotem. I have to get it correct. And the government whip this evening will be Bart. The opposition team is coached by Divya Madhavan. Their team is represented by the Shadow Prime Minister Fahes Ridi. Their second speaker is Edouard. Their third speaker is Felix. And their opposition whip will be Lina. I'm sorry. Stop. Fourth speaker is Antonia Belin. My bad. And to conclude the debate, our opposition whip is Lina Ben Younes. To decide which of these illustrious team will be the winner, we have 5 members of the jury tonight.
Here.
We have Raphaël Thiboul, Marie-Ève Pichon, Alexia Penel, Léandre Stevens, and Giovanna Trakkovic. Thank you very much for coming all the way to the south of Paris to be with us tonight. To guide them, the jury will have 5 equal criteria to follow. Argumentation, which concerns the content of the speech and the research done for it. If the speech is consistent, pertinent, and logical. Form is the next criteria, or how the said content is put forth. For instance, timing, structure, the use of rhetorical devices, etc. Teamwork is the next criteria, which pertains to how a team is cohesive and works together. What is their strategy? Engagement, how well the team interacts with their opponents. And the last criteria is star quality, that elusive but specific je ne sais quoi, which we all love.
Here.
So now let's turn to the teams and to the motion which is submitted to you this evening. This house would judge a book by its cover.
Here.
And now to begin, we have the government prime minister.
Dearest and regal chairwoman, honorable looking members of the jury, gorgeous belle girl, stylish members of the government, friends from the opposition, what an honor to be here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Some of you may have noticed a small detail about me. I'm short.
Here.
I'm tiny and frail looking. In the fraction of a second where I crossed to get to the stage, you noticed that about me. You took it in and you inferred something. Now some of you may know some strong-headed, short women and you thought, damn, they've got it coming. Well, you're right. Others may have fallen for the usual cliche. Oh, she's so petite and tiny, probably weak. In any case, you formed an initial judgment based on my looks, because that's what we do. All in all, this house would judge a book by its cover. Every single one of you would judge a book by its cover, because this is what humans do. Now, to avoid a senseless debate on semantics and semantics alone, I will rapidly define... Yes, please.
I did not think any of that when I saw you. How do you explain this?
Well, maybe you were focused on something else. Maybe you were rereading your speech. Maybe a bit nervous because of the debate. To avoid a senseless debate on semantics and semantics alone, I will define the terms of the emotions quite quickly. Would do shows a preferred attitude, a natural human reaction. To judge is a bit trickier to define because we have a very strong negative connotation associated with it in our modern era, but originally judging is simply coming to an initial conclusion. A book is a bound set of written pages, but we will of course acknowledge the metaphorical meaning of book and address it as both... Yes, please.
Wouldn't judge suggest careful consideration rather than initial thought?
Well, it can be both, and as we will mention later on, we have an initial judgment which can then be improved with later conclusions.
Hear, hear.
As I mentioned, we will expand the notion of book to metaphorical meaning and address it as both the physical object and human beings as general. Lastly, the cover is the exterior appearance of a book, a person. It is the way one is dressed, the way one carries themselves. It is so much more than a Facebook cover picture. It is a comprehensive set of visual data. Yes,
Hear,
please.
hear.
What would you say is the difference between perception and judgment?
We actually, that's a very good point, which we will mention and focus on later. Perception is something you have integrated and something that you will have put more thought in than an initial judgment, which is very cut through. So now, after these necessary but oh so tedious definitions, I would like us all to read this motion again. Read it carefully. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Except there's something slightly different about it. This idiom is usually phrased in the negative. We believe it is time to modernize the proverb. And anyway, do you know how many proverbs exist in their opposite forms too? Too many cooks spoil the broth? Yeah, well, many hands make light work. And this so-called proverbial knowledge is even negated in other cultures. As the Italians say, quando vedi una stella, per prima volta, capisci subito che è la tua. Which loosely translates into, when you see a star for the first time, you immediately understand it to be yours. So there, you have it. Being starstruck. First impressions. The coup de foudre. May it be love, friendship, or even hatred. To prove our point that this house would judge a book by its cover, our honest and straightforward team will begin with Alexandre, demonstrating the statistical reasoning behind this very human code of conduct. We will then listen to Ahmed, who will underline how judging a book by its cover is the way to become aware of our biases and to correct social injustices.
Hear, hear.
Thomas will continue that reasoning by showing you how not only is it mathematically logical to judge a book by its cover, it is also the right thing to do. To conclude, our wonderful spokesman Bart will whip an end to this debate once and for all. And now, a final thought. Some brain food to last you through the commercial break. I recently bought a gorgeous leather-bound edition of The Three Musketeers, and I decided to reread my favorite novel. And let me tell you one thing. Dumas's words have never been mightier than when I was curled up with my cup of tea and the sweet smell of old paper and leather mixed together. The beauty of the book amplified the beauty of the writing that I already knew. As I handled that precious relic, I took full measure of the author's greatness and the character's charisma. I judged the book by its cover, and God, did it get me when I read those beautiful words. All for one and one for all. United we stand, divided we fall. A pledge of camaraderie, an oath of trust. On this side of the house, we call that loyalty.
Hear, hear.
We call that teamwork, members of the jury. We call it the government.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Beatrice. Now we're going to welcome the Shadow Prime Minister, Felix.
Esteemed Chairperson, as we turn on the pages of this debate, speaker after speaker, you watch over us. You make sure that order is maintained, for it is important to listen carefully in order to formulate a proper judgment.
Hear.
Passionate timekeeper, every tick of your clock empowers the wise, the patient, those who wait before the judge, and tortures the impatient those who jump into conclusions without looking into the content. Dear judges, tonight, not only you get to judge a debate, tonight you get a debate on how to judge. And while some of us appreciate the fact that you look into the details, others want you to stop at the shell, but please, dear jury, be careful because sometimes the shell hides an empty void. Dear members of the proposition, someone who writes a good book would not want it to be judged by the cover, but if you insist, focus on the cover tonight, we'll bring in the best of the stories. Dear members of the opposition, beautiful, beastly and witchy, you stand for the truth, no matter how it looks. Let us make sure that the government doesn't miss on any good books anymore. And finally, members of the audience, it is with deepest pride and greatest pleasure that we welcome you tonight. We invite you now to sit, relax, as the opposition proudly presents this story. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, be our guest. I am Lumière, a talking calendar bearer, a French with a very sexy French accent. And I came here tonight to shed the light on the past of those who are blinded by the looks, of those who get so used to judging by what they see that they don't see anymore. How will I do that, you ask? Well, I'm going to tell you a story, of course. Oh, which one? I heard that you are very intelligent, but as I do not judge by the reputation, I will give you a little hint. It starts with the beauty and ends with the beast. I hope it's not that too hard for you. The clock did not ring. But before we get to the fun part, our story, let us start with something that is a little less.
Point of information.
Let us start with something a little less fun, the government speech. And from now on, I have been training my more formal English accent, so please bear it with me, it's going to be horrible. So the government would judge a book by the cover. Oh my God, it's even more often than I imagined, my accent, but also the motion. And we disagree with them on that simply because we find it wrong, because the cover gives little to no insight to the thing it's hiding. If we were to judge a seashell by the shell, we would have never known if it is hiding an empty void or a pearl. If we were to judge a person by its cover, we would have never known who they actually are. The government also claims that they make judgment based on initial judgment. That's actually an assessment. That's no judgment at all. That's a wild guess. And we as human beings are capable of doing more complex things. Yes, just 1 second. More complex things like speaking and getting open to each other. Yes.
If you wouldn't judge a book by its cover, why do books have covers in the first place?
Books have covers to protect them and not to be judged by them. For these reasons, the opposition has chosen that if it would judge, it would be, as the words of the great Martin Luther King, not by the cover of the book, but by the content of its pages. To do so, let me give you some insight about what you will hear from me. First, I shall put the motions term to the light, and then I shall introduce the heroes of this story. But as promised, let us start with the motion. The House would judge a book by its cover. To judge is actually to form an opinion about through careful weighing of evidence and testing of premises. It's not wild guess, it's a careful thinking. A book, we agree with you, could be an actual book, a human being, or an object. The cover is the looks, the appearance, the reputation. It's actually something that keeps us from looking inside. But the cover of the book is no jail bar, dear government. You can open it up and dive deep into the book. And this is what we are going to do now. Let us dive deep into our story. We'll start with the first chapter.
Point of information, please.
No, just a second. Was a charming prince who got turned into a beast, for he despised an old woman that he didn't shelter, at least. But little did he know what looked weak from the shell. On him shall cast a spell. The beast has learned his lessons, and he shall now teach you that content is the essence.
If the cover is just a look, why is there the name of the author, a synopsis, a title?
It gives you an insight about what's going to happen, but in order to judge it, you have to read it. Oh, that poor guy always gets a tear into my eye. Oh my God, I can't stop speaking in cheesy rhymes. If this is your doing, stop it right now. But how can we speak about the importance of the content without mentioning the potential vials of the appearance? This gets us to the second chapter. Gaston, the powerful, the brave, the generous, the hero of the story. Wait, he's actually the antagonist? It's all fake and just a cover? No way, the government would say. He isn't much indeed, a handsome fellow. But this is what he's doing. He is using his look to deceive others. And he will tell you today how people can use their image to deceive others. One surely wasn't deceived by the looks, for she has dared not to stop at the cover, but actually to open up the books. Our heroine for the third chapter, the most beautiful of them all, the one who dared to crack the shell. You got her right. She's Belle. But those who judged her by the cover got stuck to their prejudice, never got to appreciate who she actually was. They only saw a reflection of their own cliches and insecurities. And finally, the origin of the story, the source, the sorceress who started it all by casting a spell, shall end this debate before the last bell by enforcing our position and correcting every false vision.
Shame!
But we promise you, she won't turn anyone into a beast today. If anyone is willing to do so, it is the government, ladies and gentlemen. Dear audience, we shall not judge by the cover of the book, but by the content of its pages. Please, dear jury, reject this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your illuminating speech. Now we're going to pass to Alexandre. For the government.
Dear Chairwoman, dear members of the jury, lovely bell girl, friendly-looking members of the opposition, comrades of the government, evening. 叫姓老虎，用一根长棍子. It's a very famous quote from Mao Zedong, the founder of the Communist Party of China and also former chairman of the country. It means in waking a tiger, use a long stick. No matter how kind or trained a tiger is, you should always be wary of its sharp fangs. You are never too sure, and you are better safe than sorry. First, let's ask ourselves, why do we say, don't judge a book by its cover? Let's imagine you are walking down the park on a sunny, beautiful Sunday afternoon. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and you see in a distance a gentleman approaching you. He's perfectly dressed, you know, a well-fitting suit. On his wrist, a golden Swiss-made watch with leather straps. He is well-behaved, well-groomed, he's athletic, and he's walking straight. He smiles full of confidence. And let me ask you, would you say that this man is a jobless failure living in his mom's basement, watching TV all day, and eating KFC all day long in front of the TV? Well, it could be, but it will be very unlikely. Yes, miss?
By seeing Mark Zuckerberg in a t-shirt, would you assume he's a CEO of a huge company?
as I will reply to this question, we know that there are exceptions. So to come back to my question, I was asking, why do we say don't judge a book by its cover? It's because we know that there are exceptions. Just like the CEO you just mentioned, Mark Zuckerberg, he's an exception to the rule. And we acknowledge that there are exceptions to the rule. We acknowledge that there are exceptions and we take it into account in our calculations. That is why, statistically, it will be better for us to judge a book by its cover. So, Prime Minister, you mentioned that you need to take your time. Just a second. You need to take your time in order to judge someone. But you know that sometimes the time you need to explore the depth of one's personality, it's not always at your disposal. For instance, think about a HR recruiter who has to go through thousands and thousands of job applications. He doesn't have the time to read everything, to go search his LinkedIn profile. He needs filters. One misspelled words or grammar mistake, and you are out.
Yeah. So, as your term, statistically, people that have nice features, better faces, have a lighter sentence in court. Would you say to all the people in bars that they should be judged on the cover?
Actually, that's a very good question. That's called the halo effect in psychology. Actually, having a better face makes you more prone to be judged favorably in court. And that's what we do. And we should not blame human psychology for that. We should use our own capacity to better ourselves in other domains so people judge us favorably. So I spoke about HR recruiters, and it's actually the same thing with dating apps. What do? I'm so sorry, but what we do, we look at the pictures, we apply our own criteria, and we swipe as quickly as possible, right, left, right, left. If we took the time to read the bio, to go on Instagram, to look at their Spotify playlist, it would take such an absurd amount of time before we get a match, right? Right. Now, if we take the motion in its literal sense, book as a book that you can read, I believe that you can judge, or I believe that we would judge a book on its cover because there is a myriad of information on the cover, as Béatrice mentioned. New York Times bestseller, first edition of the book, winner of the Philip K. Dick Award. All those mentions show that the book was sold successfully. It's a medal of honor showing that the text was able to withstand the harsh flow of time and that it is everlasting. Also, as Béatrice mentioned, the art, the title, gives you insight into what is inside the book. If the drawing is scary, expect horror. If you see spaceships and planets, it's sci-fi. If it's contemporary art, you know for sure that it's going to be a book about deep philosophy, and that only a handful of chosen ones can understand it. Was that the 5-minute one or 6? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Now we're going to go to opposition and hear Edouard.
Dear audience, whose presence elevates this debate.
Here, here.
Here, here.
Insightful jury, who came here precisely to judge us, not by our covers, but by the content of our speeches.
Here, here.
orderly timekeeper and chairperson, whose mastery of the rules will allow for a pleasant debate.
Here, here.
Dear members of the government, thank you for making this debate possible in the first place. I am sure you are all very confident in your victory, thinking the Central team is yet inexperienced in the FDA, not that strong yet.
Here, here.
Don't worry about that. We'll teach you not to judge a book by its cover.
Here, here.
And finally, enlightened members of the opposition, thank you for spreading the right word, for spreading the wise word, for reaffirming this immemorial lesson that every child is taught and that everybody ought to remember, that you don't judge a book by its cover.
Here, here.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I may not look like it, but I am the beast. And tonight, I will speak in the name of all the unrecognized who suffer in the shadows of superficiality. We shall not judge a book by its cover, but by the content of its pages.
Here, here.
As our Prime Minister Lumière laid out, my point will be that appearance is a distraction from content. I will prove this with two main points, being that content is much more valuable than the appearance, and then that humans progress when they overcome the limitations of appearance. But before all, let me address the words of the President, speakers of the government. First, the Prime Minister. I believe she said that perception was a polished thought, something which takes time, and that judgment is more of a quick thought. But perception, I believe, is tied to the senses. It's immediate, and judgment is in no way quick. In a trial, the judge takes time to formulate its judgment. It needs information.
Here, here.
Now, about the first speaker, when he spoke about the dangers of a tiger. You know, I believe we know about the dangers of a tiger because we actually read that in books, if you want. And about the exception to the rule, you said that there was an exception to the rule about judging by the cover. This rule you talk about, just what rule it is, what defines it, I think you may be talking about prejudice, and you may be applying prejudice.
Here, here.
Now, on to my first point. Content has more value than appearance.
Here, here. Here, here.
So often, society judges people based on a standardized norm, on appearance. And I know a little something about being misjudged, thanks to this damn witch.
Here, here.
And I know somebody else who got misjudged. Ludwig
Information, please.
van Beethoven. Just a second. The great composer who went deaf late in his life, who wrote Ode to Joy, our European anthem. When he went deaf, he also went mad, and misery spilled into every aspect of his life, into his hygiene, into his social interaction. He became a recluse, and everybody deemed him to have gone utterly mad. Yet it is in the depths of this madness, under the surface of what is considered normal social behavior, that genius was born.
Here, here.
Yes, go ahead.
Dear Beast, you kidnapped Belle. Isn't your story a perfect example of Stockholm Syndrome, and Belle should have just stopped at the cover?
Here, here, here.
I don't really appreciate you attacking me directly, but apart from that, Belle loves me, and I believe if you saw the story, you saw that everybody was happy at the end. Now, this applies to people, but this can also apply to creations. You know, there was a funny guy with really funny hair who liked to tongue out on photos. Yeah, that's Einstein. And he made really great papers. So do you know why his papers were so great? Little Birdie doesn't even have a response from the government. Is it because the covers were well made and good? No, dear government, nice try, but not nice. Because the content of the paper revolutionized the world of physics. Yes, go ahead, please.
So, are you saying that the papers that Albert Einstein made are read by millions of people worldwide other than books that have good covers?
Here, here.
Einstein's papers are read by scientific people mainly. If that's your question, I mean, whatever, okay. About my second point. Human progress is synonymous with overcoming the limitations of appearance. Humans progress when they seek answers and well, when they delve further. No, thank you. We see examples of this all the time. Take science. We thought that the sun revolved around the earth up until we used our calculations and not our eyes. Take philosophy. Descartes' very first step was to doubt his senses. And take dating. We are no longer feral animals. We don't choose our love partners based on looks. Don't worry, Belle, we are better than that. Let me tell you something before this government ruins intimacy between people. If people of the government were to lead, we would choose our partners based solely on appearance. Let's open up supermarkets of men and women to choose from. Oh, wait a minute, government. You're 2 steps behind. That's called Tinder. Be sure to have your uniform on when taking your profile picture. I am sure you will earn lots and lots of swipes. Now, I believe this concludes my point. While I delved into the worth of content, my teammates will delve into the dangers of appearance. Starting with Gaston, my orc nemesis, a vile character who crafts an exterior to manipulate the others. Dear jury, I beg you, in the end, please make the moral choice. Make the choice that will make the world a wiser place. I beg you, reject this motion. We shall not judge by the cover of the book, but by the contents of its pages.
Thank you, Beastly Edward. Now we are going to pass to Ahmed for the government.
Here, here.
Dear jury members, lovely bell girl, dear members of the opposition, dear fellow members of the government, dear chairwoman, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Or as we say in Arabic, Assalamu alaikum. قال رجل للنبي كيف لي أن أعلم إذا أحسنت وإذا أسأت؟ قال النبي إذا سمعت جيرانك يقولون قد أحسنت فقد أحسنت وإذا سمعتهم يقولون قد أسأت فقد أسأت. Or in English, for those who don't understand Arabic, a man said to the messenger of God, how can I know when I have done well and when I have done something bad? The prophet replied, if you hear your neighbors saying you have done well, then you have done well. And if you hear them saying that you have done something bad, then you have done something bad.
You're here.
An excerpt from the book of the prophet saying with its purified, holy, and minimalistic looking cover. Here the prophet says that God will see your actions, but the believer sees them too. This shows that the judgment of the believers regarding a person are also important. To be naked in front of God, one needs to be naked in front of his believers. Now imagine me naked. But I am indeed naked in front of you today, because I am wearing my heart on my sleeve. This is all to transcend this mundane world and ascend to the world of the divine. Now today, I am letting you judge me and let you question your biases. Let me repeat the motion clearly for those who don't understand it. This house would judge a book by its cover. So let me clearly understand, members of the opposition. Are you saying that we should live in a world where one doesn't perceive gender, one doesn't see color, or one doesn't assume a social status? Now you might argue one cannot see them but can see them but chooses to ignore them. I beg to differ. The opposition believes that if people or institutions do not even notice or acknowledge race, then they cannot act in a racially biased manner. This belief is not only a dismissal of the lived experiences of people of color, but it also suggests that racism does not exist, refused, so long as one ignores it. Everyone wants to be treated equally, as an individual, and recognized for who they are. But perhaps the most compelling critique of the colorblind approach is the fact that people do notice race when perceiving others. It occurs as rapidly as 1/7 of a second and as quickly as 6 months of age. Now, are you saying to me that people do not judge by the cover? Yes?
So you're acknowledging race and the issues behind it. Wouldn't you agree that we should fight the people who are judging people based on their races?
Well, are you saying that we should change human psychology? Are you living in an idealistic world where you can change whoever you want based on what you believe? No, we are the government, and we are working with what people are and who they are, and we are trying to make the world a better place with that. Now let me prove to you how that can happen, because we can see racial differences during social interactions. Colorblindness doesn't help us. Instead, it encourages those who endorse this perspective to ignore the ongoing processes that maintain racial stratification in schools, neighborhoods, healthcare, and other social institutions. Now, look at me. You see me, you hold a judgment, consciously or unconsciously. What I present myself as, what I look like. You might notice the color of my skin, my beautiful attire, or wonder about the Arabic I mumbled. Some of you could be scared that I might say 2 forbidden words and make you run out of here in panic. These are all cliches, stereotypes, a prioris, call them whatever you want. But they are, in fact, the discrimination I might live through, the racism I might endure, and the differences in our lived experiences. Acting like they don't exist and shaming people for having a judgment on my appearance, race, gender presentation plays a role in invisibilizing minorities and further excluding them. This is what the government wants today, is for all of us to listen to those voices inside our heads. The first thought that comes to mind when one sees a person, as we can all learn something from it. Now the same can be done for disabilities. A human being in his 40s, wearing a tie, long brown hair, in a wheelchair. Are you going to ignore him, act like his disability doesn't exist, or use a politically correct word like physically impaired being? Or are we going to acknowledge his disability and adapt our response to them? Judging a book by its cover is good because it underlies empathy and makes us help other people. We form immediate impressions of people. Yes, please.
Do you think that what defines that person in a wheelchair is the fact that they are in a wheelchair and that's their value and contribution to your experience with them?
Now, do you think that not noticing them in a wheelchair will help you adapt your response to helping them? Do you think that invisibilizing this person will not adapt how we build our houses, how we make accessible things? Ignoring those people makes the world a bad place. We form immediate impressions of people. We can't just help it. It's in our nature. It's our human psychology. Now, as my friend Alexandre said, I've always been also a big fan of beauty. Okay, members of the opposition, you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but who wants to have sex with a book? Now, as you ponder on my words, I'll gladly remind you that always, as my friend Béatrice said, judging comes before perceiving. Judging is forming an opinion about, while perceiving is becoming aware or conscious of that opinion. Now again, members of the opposition, reread this motion and think clearly of your misconceptions.
Ahmed. Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Felix.
Outstanding members of the jury, who I hope won't judge who I hope won't give the victory to the most well-dressed team, because I don't want to feel remorse for not putting diamonds in my 3-piece suit. Distinguished chairperson, conscientious timekeeper, don't be fooled by the members of government. Behind these clean haircuts, nice mouths, those perfect Dr. Jekylls may camouflage some darker Mr. Hyde. Fellow members of the opposition, whose hurt goes to the depths of the mind rather than the shallowness of appearance. Why would we be engineered rather than Instagram influencers otherwise, and taking pictures in leopard panties? And it pays very well to take pictures in leopard panties nowadays. Dear members of good government, how good to know that you've made it to the quarters, only through the cover. I realize it's a long time. You have not gotten further than page 1. But don't worry, even if you have trouble reading, with the help of a wonderful team, we'll dig deep into the book. Ladies and gentlemen, be our guest, and good evening. Dear audience and jury, I think everybody here knows who I am. But considering that some might live in troop headquarters, I'm Gaston. But please, call me by my real name. I'm Gaston, the strong, the magnificent, the intelligent, and humble. Please, to all the ladies in the audience, please keep calm, keep your voices down. I might be able to sign your t-shirt at the end of the speech. I was repelled by the beast in the speeches of the members of government. The beast, well, because look at him. And the members of government, because they didn't get what judging a book by its cover actually means. I've heard about the whip that said that she goes to libraries to smell books. Someone even said that he wanted to have sex with books. I thought, that's what I thought. People, they don't know what a book is made for. The second speaker described someone beautiful and well-dressed and very wealthy, approaching woman, and how we do not care about description, playlist, and tests. Alexandre, are you the Tinder swindler? The third speaker showed that they don't really care about helping someone that is in a wheelchair. No, they just want to take a picture in Instagram and say, I'm a good man, I take pictures, you see, I can help people in wheelchair. And they don't care, they will just make a 100K and don't give anything about it. As a shaman who uses appearances to his advantage later, I will show you with two arguments that appearances are never to be trusted. Because one, people will show you only their best self, and two, their true self is never, their best self is never their true self. Go ahead.
You're saying that we would only help people for a picture, but just the fact that the wheelchair is could be the cover of the disabled people, doesn't it allow them to actually make good deeds for the world?
It can, but it's better to have real feelings about him, because there is a difference between helping him one time and all your life, and being a nice person. No, first, people will show you their best sides, because appearance is a carefully crafted art. Dear members of the government, indulge me as I show you how it's done. Number one rule in my tavern. Everybody, and I don't care if you're Kim Kardashian or Mother Teresa, everybody will seize you up the minute you walk through the door. Everybody knows if your hair has been cut, bleached, or ironed in panic. But you know what? That's a good thing for us members of the government, because it's all a fugazi. You know what a fugazi is? Fugazi. It's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's not in the elemental charts. And it's not even real, because appearances can be carefully crafted. And I don't talk about ending up like the Bogdanov brother. No. You can build some muscle so that everybody thinks that you're strong and reliable. Look, Belle. She's already in love with me, you know? That's too easy. Too easy. You just need to go to the gym and maybe pop a quick milligram of steroids. But relax. FDA isn't up to speed with drug testing.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Some jealous people... No, thank you. Some jealous people might say that without my biceps, I'm like some members of the government without a sword and a funny-shaped hat, an empty shell of a man. As for the answers, do I think I'm smarter than people? You're damn right I do. Number two rule in my tavern. Reputation, that is part of the appearance, can be crafted too. Once you have a good reputation, people will follow you everywhere, doing everything you want them to do. If I want to kill this rippling beast, I just have to snap my fingers.
Point of information.
Go ahead.
Aren't you trying to build an image and a cover for you so you can have Belle on your side.
That's really true, but I do this not because I think it's good, but because I do it because it's right for me. But I don't think we should judge a book by its cover. But I can do anything for that pretty face, you know? Members of the house, here is the recipe, no thank you, for killing the beast. First, suit up, like Barney Stinson, and slap on some cologne. Then, galvanize the villager who will follow your lead. 3. Add 100 milligrams of slenders about the beast. 4. Simmer over low heat for 20 minutes. You don't trust me? Gordon Ramsay told me that he was jealous of how good and simple this recipe was. So you see, appearances can be crafted too. Moving on to the second argument, appearances are never yourself. You can fake who your appearances, but you can fake who you are. Who I am? Well, I'm the best. Any villager will know that. But do I have a real conversation with villagers? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. I don't talk to them. They're only villagers. That's why I must admit I'm a bit confused by the turn of events in this debate. I used to show up in debates in my wonderful red polo shirt and my amazing black pants, and wham, I would be declared winner. Just last week, I got Socrates arrested thanks to my 100% cotton suit. I can see that Polytechnique tried to use this technique, but sorry, Ireland can use this technique. Nice try. Dear members of the jury, please, I beg you to turn down the members of the government, but turn the pages instead, because we shall not judge a book by its cover, but by the content of its pages. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Thomas for the government.
Dear Chairwoman, dear Belle Girl, dear members of the jury, naive members of the opposition, dear Assembly, good evening. Las primeras impresiones duran, aprovechalas al máximo. This Spanish proverb translates to first impression lasts, make the most of it. The first time I saw the book cover of Servir by the Général d'Armée Pierre de Villiers, I immediately knew what it would talk about. In case you cannot picture it, let me describe it to you. The cover is mostly white, with a picture of the Général d'Armée from when he was the chef d'état-major in his uniform. Kind of sets the tone of the book, doesn't it?
Here.
Well, it did, since the book makes a situational analysis of the French army. Because, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, this house believed that you would judge a book by its cover. And tonight I'm going to demonstrate that the naive members of the opposition would too. First of all, the Spanish proverb says, first impressions last. And while it might be hard for the opposition to acknowledge it, they know it. I first want to take the example of the job interview to demonstrate it. I will then move on to the benefits of this motion. As we have seen through the speech of Alexandre, it statistically makes sense to actually judge a book by its cover, while I will cover the qualitative side of the argument, as we believe it can actually make the world better. They might tell you that they don't, but they would. In fact, you, dear Assembly, would judge a book by its cover. I mean, would you take me very seriously if I had shown up in a clown costume? When you go to a job interview, don't you wear the right attire for the job? Yeah. My uncle is a video producer. Well, when he goes to get a contract, well, he dresses for the job. Meaning that video producers usually don't wear suits and adopt a more relaxed attire to play their part. If I want to get a job in corporation, I do my research beforehand to know what kind of mindsets they explain and show up in the right attire. Please.
Don't you think there is a difference between basic human dress code and making a full-fledged judgment?
Here.
I think it helps in the judgment that you're going to make.
Shame.
You would judge a book by its cover because the cover reflects the theme and the tone of the book. For people, the cover would reflect their personality and what trait they want to promote. I mean, the argument of the opposition is that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, first of all, the motion is this house would judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
How sad. I mean, how sad is the opposition to have such a pessimistic view of the world? Sure, we don't live in a world of bisounours, like Ahmed said, but whether you like it or not, you would judge a book by its cover. Fully embrace it. It allows you to define a line of action. When you see someone crying of sadness, you won't think that they are happy. Well, you will tailor your behavior to make the person feel better. Judging a book by its cover allows you to bring good deeds and more empathy in the world. And it saddens me that the opposition doesn't see it our way.
Shame.
And I can already feel your points of information coming my way. But Thomas, what about when the cover of the book scares you? What about the daily facies? Well, like Ahmed, I will address your concern straight away. Judging a book by its cover allows you to be aware of your biases, your irrational fears. Judging a book by its cover, like I said previously, allows you to define a line of action. Actually, let me precise this statement. It allows you to define the right line of action. The one without bias, without irrational fear. The one that brings us together. The one that makes us better people. And this planet a better place. Because this motion makes you aware of the shortcomings of your thinking and how to act on them. Judging a book by its cover is beneficial to everybody. Why having a cover in the first place? I mean, you said it's to protect the book, but when I buy the folio edition of my book, the cover is so thin, I don't think it protects it that much. It saved your life. No, thank you. To continue on Alexandre's argument, when graphic designer came up with the nuclear or biohazard sign, I'm not sure they wanted you to think about whether you should question your judgment or not. I mean, I would run my ass off from as far away from the nuclear waste or the biohazard that is here. Or maybe, if you are fit for the task, manipulate it carefully. To conclude, you would judge a book by its cover. Please let us not drown in the sorrow and sadness of the opposition. Let's make the world a better place by embracing this notion. Yes.
So was it the one that were discriminated because of their appearance, was it beneficial, like you say?
Like I said previously, today we live in the 21st century, and judging a book by its cover allows you to be aware of your shortcomings and to act on them. Like you said previously with Ahmed, it allows you to not be blinded by saying, oh, I'm colorblind and I won't discriminate. No. It allows you to say, okay, I might discriminate, and actually then reflect on it, act on it in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And now we're going to go into the fourth speaker for the opposition, Antonia.
Eminent members of the jury, who have probably heard our story more than once, but who I know will not judge us before fairly listening to what we have to say tonight. Dear chairperson, who dared open this book for us to tell our story and didn't let our cover be our only advocate. Esteemed timekeeper, who oversees the path and rhythm of our story and hopefully listens attentively to the plot we are trying to convey. Members of the government, fellow members of the opposition, may you always embrace the inner child within you, but maturing enough to understand that appearances are not all there is. Ladies and gentlemen, be our guest. I am Belle. You've heard the beast. You've endured the Gaston.
Shame.
Now, it is my turn. As many of you I know, I love books. There are so many of them and so little time. So of course, this motion is one I feel very passionate about. It is for the same reason that there are some things that I cannot let pass without addressing. First of all, getting in tone with the opposition, I would like to say that lo esencial es invisible a los ojos, which means the essential is invisible to the eye. Continuing what you said, I would like to address that I am Belle, we live in the 21st century, and I hope that more judgments about my beauty and my lack of intelligence. I do not have Stockholm syndrome. I am clever enough to understand if I'm being tricked or not, so thank you very much. Also, I'd like to point out that you managed to perfectly describe Ted Bundy. He was walking down the park and I saw him. And I was like, should I go up to him? Well, anyway.
Point of information.
No, thank you. If you have ever listened to my story, you would know many have been blinded by my beauty. Even to the point of obsession. So Gaston, please stop staring at me.
Shame.
Nevertheless, I have been fortunate enough to encounter people who have seen beyond that. People who have been able to see my true self.
Hear, hear.
For this reason, it is my mission today to convince you not to judge a book by its cover, but by the content of its pages. Look at me. I have been underestimated, overlooked, and outright ignored, even by the government, as nothing more than a pretty girl for most of my life. But I am smart, I am caring, passionate, selfless, and far a better leader for the villagers than the Gaston could ever be. My self-worth extends far beyond my beauty. For appearance of a person tells you nothing of who they are, and were you to judge someone solely on their appearance would tell more about who you are than who they are. Firstly, because judging solely on their appearance is merely projecting your own insecurities onto them. And secondly, your interpretation of what you see falls entirely on your own prejudices, bias, and culture. Now,
Point of information.
Yeah, sure.
So you would say you don't have any prejudices?
Oh, no, I have many prejudices. But by the fact that I analyze the content, I can overcome my prejudices in order to examine what is before me. First of all, I dare to assume that every one of us present here today has at least one thing about themselves that they feel insecure about. I am not here to point it out, so don't worry. Military haircuts won't be a point of discussion. We don't want to bring back painful memories. Anyway, maybe you can relate to me and have once doubted whether you were smart enough, talented enough, pretty enough. It is accurate to assume that if you see that same characteristic in someone else, you would immediately, unconsciously, define them by that trait that you think you lack. Even maybe to the point of obsession and become hatred. Why do you think the White Queen was so obsessed with destroying Snow White? By the way, the apple we gave you, totally safe. She was a reflection of all that she wanted to be. Snow White was all that the Queen wanted to be but couldn't. But she didn't stop to wonder if what made each one of them special was something else. Something beyond their beauty. Yeah, sure.
Are you that jealous that you can't just be in awe of someone's talent instead of wishing it your own?
We're not saying that. We're saying that these are the insecurities that you might project. We're not telling, maybe I'm not insecure about my talent and I won't judge someone or their talent. Subsequently, we are a product of our own culture, education, and prejudices. Therefore, how we perceive appearances or this first impression, so those shallow encounters with people we don't really know, will be defined by who we are and will have nothing to tell about them. Imagine this. You're walking down the street and suddenly the unimaginable happens. You cross paths with a black cat, a bad-luck cat, an evil cat, the witch's cat, the cat of Satan. A creature that will only bring you misfortune and misery for the rest of your days. If this is a place your mind just went to, it doesn't really say anything about the poor creature. In fact, it was all about you. The only information we got out of it was that you are what some would call superstitious.
Point of information?
No, thank you. I would say clinically compromised. On the whole, all of this tells me that it is our own bias, insecurities, prejudices that speak of us when judging a book by its cover. And it doesn't actually provide any information on the book itself, but rather on us. So I urge you not to let people like Gaston deceive you with their looks, and not to let people like the beast and me be overlooked because of them. I understand you might still be a little baffled about this world of appearances, prejudices, misconceptions, deceit, but don't worry, there's still one more chapter in our book, which the creator of all this drama we call life will soon enough clarify and conclude this marvelous adventure of us. All things considered, I beg you, dear jury, please deny this motion. Don't limit yourself to your own prejudices when getting to know people. Allow yourselves to feel the complete experience, whatever it might be, for beauty is found within. Finally, we shall not judge by the cover of the book, but by the content of its pages.
Thank you, Val. Now we are going to our last speaker for the government, Bart.
Logistical problems. Honourable members of the House, members of the government, members of the opposition, dear Chairwoman, sorry, members of the jury, bell person, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This House would judge a book by its cover. This government, which has been lawfully elected, based on its integrity, its reputation, the feeling of trust it projects. In one word, based on its name, on its appearance, based on its cover. And glad to be a humble servant is here to make clear the quality of a simple motion. This House would judge a book by its cover. Prime Minister Béatrice introduced the motion in such a convincing way that my job here should be done. And she defined the terms of the debate in such an exquisite manner that I am left truly speechless. And yet I still have a few things to say. Now it has probably occurred to you that this is the 17th of March and that we are all celebrating St. Patrick's Day. I want to turn my attention to an Irishman that changed his craft forever. The indefinable James Joyce. Most 100 years ago to this date, he published a book that many talk about, but that actually very few have read. A book that changed the course of literature. Its cover was a simple blue, but it enticed, attracted, enchanted, just the way Béatrice did tonight. This book was called Ulysses, and under its cover lied the unfathomable depth of words and feeling almost impossible to describe. No, what best describes this book is not a summary on Wikipedia. It's not the countless critiques that have tried to make sense of it. What best describes this book is one color, blue, and blue is its cover. Now, moving on to Béatrice. I didn't know they made small talking versions of the Oxford Dictionary. I mean, this is great. But now her size got you wondering, but her arguments actually got you convinced. And I believe that if you weren't convinced by her first impression, the way she answers the opposition POIs made you change your mind. And then, Mr. Dridi, where to begin? With that 75-second long introduction, or with the sexy French accent? Dear Mr. Dridi, this country was not built on pleasantry, on silly jokes, on froggish accents. This is an insult to millions of taxpayers. Hoping that this parliament will do its job and discuss a motion. And to tell silly jokes around the place is just outright insulting them. Now, Mr. Dridi, you did manage to do a fantastic job as far as not giving any form of definition of the motion is concerned. Stories, stories, stories. You're advocating for content, but you're not giving any. Alex, the tiger had awoken. Alex did something that Mr. Dridi had repeatedly failed to do during his 1 hour-long speech. Tell a story that actually makes sense with this motion. The halo effect. I learned something tonight, and I am quite sure that the opposition did as well. Your only one mistake, Alex, talking about Tinder matches with people that clearly have never been swiped right. Then came the beast. Well, quite the carnival, I'm guessing, at this point on your team. Can you believe these guys coming on stage, blaming appearances and first impressions, and all pretending to be some sort of character, all taking cover under the cover of someone else, referring to a figure known by everyone. And why did you think they did this? Because they wanted people to relate instantly, to identify you, to understand their points. Now stop hiding under a cover if you're pretending to hate them.
Did you really understand the Beast and the Beautiful and the Beast? Because it's not about the cover.
No, I did not understand because, as you said, you are the most intelligent person in the room, and I'm really too dumb to get the story. For such a fierce beast you were pretending to be, you kept begging the jury to hear your point. How brave. Talking about cover, Ahmed, about your first impression, how much time did it take him to make a great impression on all of you? A few or more definitions were not too much to try and debunk these opposition's crooked beliefs. Mr. Denison, another 60-minute long cheesy introduction. Then proceeded to prove my point by quoting, actually often misquoting, our speeches, judging them literally at the bottom of the letter, without the slightest hint of metaphorical thinking, judging them by their cover. But my favorite part was when you told us that this motion applies to you in order to seduce your charming belle, but that it shouldn't to others. Not only are you so much better than any of us, but you also are above the law. And finally, Bella. Belle. Literally, your name is the quality you're most known for. Your name defines you. But as you said, you have many other talents. One of them is being clever and being analytical. And this is what you answered to Ahmed's POI. This allowed for you to say that you ignore completely first impressions, that you want to dig, to analyze, to poke around like a little detective. Do you even believe in love at first sight? When people show you who they are, believe them the first time, my Angelou. Doubt, doubt, doubt. All I've heard tonight from you is doubt. Doubting people, doubting impressions, doubting. And to finish, a bit of Finnish. Who asks for the road does not get lost. Enough with that. Enough with doubt. Let's start to see the truth.
Thank you, Bart, for that very intense speech. Now we're going to hear our final speaker, the whip for the opposition, Lina.
Here.
Honourable Chairperson, who opened the book for us to tell our stories. Esteemed timekeeper, who knows appearances to fade away with time, and for content to be the only thing of matter. Eminent members of the jury, who do not judge us on our looks, handsome as they may be, or our attires, fabulous as they are. And thank goodness, because how could we possibly compete with the members of the government? Speaking of whom, dear members of the government, you got yourself all dolled up tonight. Now, do not worry, we've teased you quite a bit tonight and will certainly continue doing so. But the truth of the matter is, on behalf of the whole team, it's an honor debating with you. Fellow members of the opposition, and ladies and gentlemen, be our guests, and good evening. I am the witch, the witch, if you will, who cursed the beast. Now, why did I do that? I did that so that he could learn a valuable lesson, not to judge based on appearances. I presented myself as an old beggar and asked for shelter. And repulsed by my wretched appearance, he turned me away. And so I turned him into a beast. Now, you might say that witches hold grudges. Well, I'm a very good witch, so I hold a good few grudges on what this government has just said. You've all been waiting for it. Let's start with rebuttals. Well, I really loved the wit of the government proving our point by spending his whole speech doing ad hominem attacks and attacking us on our appearance. Now, that is to be expected from a government who is defending such a silly motion. We're still waiting for you to actually acknowledge the arguments that we've just talked about. Please go ahead.
So, what you're saying now isn't an ad hominem attack, or do I not understand it?
Is it a personal attack to simply point out the fact that your speaker spent well, 6 minutes attacking us. I don't believe it is. So, and finally, for a person who takes pride in understanding the true meaning of the motion, you fail to understand the fact that Belle's name is actually a metaphor for the fact that everything, the whole thing that we see in her is beauty. So, you might want to reread your concepts. So, now that this is out of the way, our debate tonight has revolved around 2 points of contention. Firstly, what it means to fight against the colorblind idea, and secondly, the idea that we always have to pass down judgments. Now, as for the first one, you've made this debate mostly about discrimination. And I think that it is a valid point to make, and that such matters should be discussed, and we're happy to, in the opposition. Yes, of course, you have to acknowledge bias in order to fight discrimination. But isn't the reason why you fight bias the fact that you fight your urge to judge people based on their appearance? Later on, you mentioned the fact that, oh, but if I see a person in a wheelchair, I'm not going to just ignore his or her handicap. Yes, of course, I'm not going to do so. But what does that have to do with judgment? It has to do with common sense. So, you can. I believe that what people who are discriminated against, and I might know this in my flesh, actually want is to be seen as more than their difference.
Point of information.
Please go ahead.
So, would you say that judge has a negative or a positive connotation when you use it?
I believe that the very idea of judgment holds no positive nor negative. What is, I believe, not logical is to make judgment until you have sufficient information. And this is my second point of contention. Do you always have to pass down judgments? Now, Belle and Gaston have demonstrated to you that appearances are not to be trusted. Firstly, because they are carefully crafted in order to show whatever the person who's crafted them see fit.
Point of information.
No, thank you. As Gaston not only embodies, but more importantly, demonstrated to you. And secondly, because how you interpret appearances says more about who you are than who they are, as Belle explained to you. So this raises a dilemma for the government. If appearances are so untrustworthy, what do you do when you do not have the time to pay attention to content? This is a question that you've asked us. Do not worry, we understand that this is very distressing and we have an answer for you. In those cases, does judgment always have to be passed? We would argue not. We would argue when you have neither the experience nor the expertise to do so, please refrain from passing down judgments. You do not have to have strong opinions on everything. No, thank you. So the government, no, thank you. So the government later explained that, well, you need to form a judgment in order to take a decision. Well, I believe that the government should see a difference between making a quick assessment in order to take a hasty decision and making an informed decision based on your judgment. You've tried to make, no, thank you. You've tried to make this about quick judgments. Well, if all judgments are quick, why do you have to precise quick judgments? So I believe this concludes my second point of contention. The government's burden was to show that we should judge a book by its cover. Now, in order to do such a thing, one would have to prove one of two things. Either that there is nothing else that would allow to judge a book. I believe that not to be the case. Content is available. Or the government would have to prove that out of all the ways you could possibly judge a book, the appearance to be the best one, or the cover. Well, how could that be true when the opposition has demonstrated time and time again the cover or appearance to be unreliable? So the government has truly failed to demonstrate their point. I might turn to toast. Thank you, dear jury, to please reject this motion, for we shall not judge by the cover of the book, but by the content of its pages.
Thank you, Lina. Please don't turn me into a frog. we have come to the conclusion of our debate. I am going to show the judges where they can deliberate. In the meantime, as I go out and come back, please feel free to ask any questions you would like of the debaters on their debate.